A morning on Mount Washington often begins in complete calm. Clear skies, light winds, cars lining up along the road that leads straight to the summit. Some people stop to take photos, some buy souvenirs. Others simply stand there, looking out, thinking this is nothing more than a perfectly ordinary day trip. The mountain rises just 6,288 feet above sea level, low enough that in many parts of the country it wouldn't even be considered a real mountain. No glaciers, no sheer cliffs, no weeks of preparation or specialized equipment required. Everything looks fine, in a way that feels slightly off. Because on this same gentle-looking mountain, there is a number that doesn't make sense. A fatality rate per vertical foot that quietly surpasses many mountains far more infamous than this one. There are mountains that look like they're going to kill you. Mount Washington does not. So what is happening on this small, unassuming peak that has caused people to never return, again and again, for nearly 2 centuries? In this video, we're going to trace back what's really hiding behind that harmless appearance. And if you want to understand how a place that feels this safe can become a deadly trap, keep watching. If you enjoy true stories told in a cinematic documentary style, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Midday at Mount Washington is usually crowded. Cars pull over along the road. Tourists step out, pull their jackets tighter against the wind, and instinctively reach for their phones to take photos. Right beside them stand stone buildings, an information center, souvenir shops, and places selling hot drinks. Everything here is designed to create the feeling that this environment is controlled, that the risks have already been accounted for, that if something goes wrong, the system will handle it. But just a few steps away from this tourist area, there is something that doesn't belong in this scene. A plaque. On it, a list of names. People who never made it back. The first recorded death on Mount Washington occurred in 1849. Since then, more than 160 people have died on this mountain. That number does not include the thousands who were rescued while hovering dangerously close to death. In fact, every decade, New Hampshire rescue teams carry out hundreds of search and rescue missions here alone. According to data from New Hampshire Fish and Game, Mount Washington consumes more rescue resources than any other location in the state. Not because it is the hardest place to reach, but because incidents happen here more often than anywhere else. What's striking is that most people standing on the summit during an ordinary day do not feel like they are in danger. They are not crossing glaciers. They are not climbing sheer rock faces. They are not entering restricted zones. They are simply visiting a place that has been designed for tourism. And that design creates a powerful, unspoken assumption that this place is safe. That if real danger existed, it would be more clearly marked. That the deaths belong to isolated cases involving other people under exceptional circumstances. But the history of Mount Washington tells a different story. These deaths are not randomly distributed. They occur steadily, across generations, under different conditions, involving very different people. Some were tourists, some were highly experienced hikers, some were only a few hundred meters from shelter. The one thing they all shared was this. At the moment everything began slipping out of control, none of them believed they were in serious danger. Mount Washington is not a place without warnings. It is a place where people have grown accustomed to death. So if it isn't the height of the mountain, what is it that keeps turning reasonable decisions into situations with no way back? A typical day on Mount Washington often begins comfortably. At the base of the mountain, the weather feels mild, light wind, temperatures warm enough to convince people that a thin jacket will be sufficient. That assumption comes first, and it is the most dangerous one. At the summit, Weather does not operate according to human intuition. It operates according to data. In 1934, observers at the summit recorded wind speeds of 231 miles per hour. The measurement was taken using mechanical instruments, not estimates. To this day, it remains the strongest non-tornado wind speed ever recorded. 231 miles per hour is not a passing gust. It does not arrive and disappear. It sustains for hours, sometimes for days. On Mount Washington, hurricane-force winds occur more than 100 days each year, not during an unusually severe winter, but during an average year. As wind speed increases, temperature begins to lose meaning. The thermometer may read -50 degrees Fahrenheit, but the wind chill can drive the perceived temperature down to -100. At that level, exposed skin can become numb within minutes. This is where options begin to narrow. Stopping to change layers means standing still in the wind. Continuing forward means losing strength faster. Turning back may no longer be possible if the route is no longer visible. Because when weather collapses on Mount Washington, it does not just get colder, it erases space. Whiteout conditions can form without warning. Sky and ground merge into a single field of white. Trails disappear. Markers lose their meaning. Distance becomes distorted. A 5-minute stretch of trail can turn into a permanent wrong turn. Snow on this mountain does not respect seasons. Even in midsummer, snowfall is possible, and when it falls, it does not settle evenly. The wind sculpts it into deep drifts that completely bury familiar paths. These early signs of instability often appear long before disaster. Winds stronger than expected, visibility shrinking, temperatures dropping faster than forecast. But at that moment, few people treat them as reasons to stop, because on the map, the remaining distance looks short, and rationally, everything still seems manageable. Weather on Mount Washington does not kill in a single instant. It kills minute by minute, as each safe option quietly disappears. And that leads to an unavoidable question. Why does a mountain this small produce a weather system this severe? The weather on Mount Washington is not random. It does not come and go by chance. It is created, repeated, and sustained by the mountain's position itself. Mount Washington sits at the center of the Presidential Range, a low but strategically aligned mountain chain positioned directly in the path of several major air systems. From the north, cold air masses descend from Canada. From the east, moist air and strong winds push inland from the Atlantic Ocean. From the west, persistent continental winds move across New England. Under normal conditions, these airflows would disperse. Here, they are forced together. The geography of the Presidential Range functions like a wall. Air is compressed, funneled, and then driven toward a single escape route, upward. This process is known as the Venturi effect. When space narrows, wind speed increases sharply. No storm is required. No unusual pressure system is necessary. Only familiar conditions occurring at the same time. The wind does not spread evenly across the slopes. It is driven straight toward the summit. And at approximately 4,400 feet, the environment changes abruptly. Vegetation disappears. Trees no longer survive. There are no natural barriers left to slow the wind. Above this point, a person is fully exposed. There is no buffer zone, no gradual transition, no place for the wind to weaken. Most hikers do not recognize this moment immediately. On a map, it appears to be just another elevation gain. There are no warning signs, no visible boundary, but physically, they have entered a different system. One where wind is no longer an environmental factor, but the dominant force shaping every decision that follows. From that point on, every choice carries a higher cost. Stopping means being stripped of heat by the wind. Moving forward means being pushed offline. Turning back is no longer as simple as it was minutes earlier. Mount Washington does not need to be tall. It only needs to stand in the right place. And that leaves a question that cannot be ignored. If the conditions here are this severe, why do people keep coming back to this mountain year after year? On Mount Washington, danger does not come from wind and cold alone. It comes from the feeling that everything has already been made safe. The road that leads straight to the summit is the first thing that creates that feeling. No climbing required, no long preparation. Just drive up, park, and step outside. Then there is the cog railway, carrying visitors upward in a matter of minutes. A smooth ride. Seats, a fixed schedule. Everything reinforces a simple assumption that if getting up is this easy, getting back down must be easy too. At the summit stands the Tip Top House, a hotel that has existed since the 19th century. Around it are souvenir shops, hot drinks, and the familiar atmosphere of a tourist destination. This setting blurs the boundary between wilderness and attraction. The risk does not disappear, but the sense of risk does. From there, a decision that feels reasonable begins to form. Walk a little farther, just to see more clearly, just to take a few more photos, just to experience what it feels like to stand on the roof of New England. Many people begin their journey from the summit itself, not as mountaineers, but as visitors. Their clothing reflects that mindset. Jeans, shoes not designed for prolonged exposure to cold wind. At that moment, the choice does not feel wrong. The weather still seems manageable, visibility is still open, the distance on the map still looks short. But descending Mount Washington is not like descending anywhere else. The body has already cooled after standing on the summit. The wind now blows directly into the hiker's path. Each step strips away more heat than it did on the way up. This is where the thought begins to take over. Just one more stretch. Turning back now feels unnecessary. Moving forward feels more logical. And with every step taken, the margin of safety grows smaller. The warning signs are often already there. Stronger wind, cold penetrating faster, visibility slowly closing in. But they are underestimated because the surrounding system still looks familiar. The road is still there. The buildings are still there. The idea that one can turn back at any time still feels true, until it isn't. On Mount Washington, the thing that convinces you that you can turn back whenever you want is the very thing that ensures you never will. And the next question no longer belongs to nature, but to history. Who were the first people this trap claimed? Long before there were roads, cog railways, or hotels at the summit, this mountain was understood in a very different way. The Abenaki people called it Agiokochuk. To them, it was a sacred place, a dwelling of forces that should not be disturbed. The summit was believed to be off-limits to humans, not because it was tall, but because it did not accept human presence. In 1524, the Italian explorer Giovanni da Verrazzano became the first European to record seeing the mountain from the Atlantic Ocean. From that distance, it appeared striking, snow-capped, almost inviting. There was nothing to suggest danger. In 1642, Darby Field made what is considered the first recorded ascent. He survived, but his account carried no sense of triumph. Violent winds, barren rock, a summit unlike any place he had known. Those warnings did not stop people from coming. By the 19th century, Mount Washington began transforming into a destination. Trails were established. A summit hotel was built. The mountain shifted from a sacred place to a challenge meant to be conquered. And with that shift came the first recorded deaths. In 1849, Frederick Strickland became the mountain's first known victim. He did not die on the ascent. He died on the way down. Lost in dense fog and battered by wind, Strickland strayed from the trail. He kept moving, believing he would find his way back. When his body was recovered, he had frozen to death in a riverbed. 6 years later, the mountain claimed Lizzie Bourne. She was only 23 years old, wearing the heavy clothing of the Victorian era, living with a pre-existing heart condition. Lizzie and her family set out to watch the sunrise from the summit. As the afternoon progressed, the weather deteriorated. Cold winds, rain, and thick fog erased the trail. When night fell, they built a crude stone shelter to shield themselves from the wind. By morning, Lizzie never woke up. She died from hypothermia. When the fog finally lifted, the official shelter came into view. It was only a few hundred meters away. Mount Washington does not kill by height, it kills by distance. And as the era of technology, maps, weather forecasts, and professional rescue began, the question became even more unsettling. With all of those tools available, are people actually any safer on this mountain today? By the 20th century, everything seemed different. Maps were more detailed, weather forecasts more accurate, rescue equipment faster. But on Mount Washington, none of that guaranteed survival. In 1933, 19-year-old Simon Joseph set out with friends toward the Lake of the Clouds hut in poor weather. Cold rain, strong winds, and thick fog gradually separated the group. There was no panic, just a single wrong turn in limited visibility. Simon kept moving, believing he was getting closer to shelter. When his body was found days later, he was only a short distance from the hut. In 1982, Albert Dow, an experienced volunteer rescuer, climbed the mountain to search for 2 missing teenagers. Conditions were severe. Avalanche warnings had been issued. The mission continued anyway. During the descent, an avalanche struck. Albert was buried and did not survive. He remains the only rescue volunteer to die during an active mission on Mount Washington. 12 years later, in 1994, at Tuckerman Ravine, Sarah had just completed a ski run. Warnings about falling ice had already been posted. Signs of instability were visible on the headwall. Then, a massive block of ice, estimated at 15 tons, broke free. There was no time to react. Sarah was killed instantly. In 2019, a 32-year-old skier entered the Raymond's Cataract area, a known avalanche zone. Fresh snow, an unstable base, steep terrain. A slide occurred, burying him beneath compacted snow. By the time rescuers reached him, he was in cardiac arrest. In 2024, tragedies followed in quick succession. 2 hikers slipped in separate areas of the mountain, sliding hundreds of meters over hard ice and exposed rock. One died at the scene. The other suffered critical injuries. That same year, Jesse, an experienced hiker, attempted the Presidential Traverse alone. He carried modern equipment, monitored the forecast, shared his location with family. As conditions deteriorated, he continued, believing he still had enough time to reach shelter. His final messages were brief. He was in trouble. He could not move. He might die. Jesse was found less than a mile from safety. He did not survive. Months later, a 72-year-old tourist took the Cog Railway to the summit. He began walking down in light clothing. The weather turned. Temperatures dropped rapidly. Winds intensified. The next day, his body was discovered not far from the summit. The common thread in these tragedies is not obvious recklessness. It is not inexperience. It is not a lack of preparation. Most of them did not die in storms. They died after believing the danger had already passed. And when these stories are placed side by side, a deeper question begins to emerge. If these tragedies keep repeating in familiar ways, is Mount Washington killing people according to a very specific pattern? When these tragedies are placed side by side, one fact becomes clear. The deaths on Mount Washington do not occur at random. They follow a repeated pattern. Long-term data shows that nearly half of all fatalities here are caused by long, sliding falls. Not sudden stumbles, but uncontrolled slides over hard ice, compacted snow, and exposed rock. Once traction is lost, there is no way to stop. The next major category is hypothermia and cold exposure. This process does not happen instantly. It unfolds step by step. The body loses heat faster than it can produce it. Reaction time slows. Decisions become hesitant. Avalanches occur less frequently, but when they do, the outcome is often final. A small shift in timing, terrain, or snow conditions can turn a familiar slope into a lethal trap. Heart attacks are another silent factor. Not because the victims are weak, but because cold wind, sustained exertion, and relative oxygen deprivation place extreme stress on the body. Chest pain or sudden exhaustion can occur in places where stopping is not an option. Getting lost and exhaustion are rarely the direct causes of death, but they make every other danger irreversible. A wrong turn in fog, a pace slower than planned, a decision to continue when turning back would have been safer. What all of these scenarios share is the absence of a single catastrophic mistake. They begin with decisions that are entirely reasonable at the time. The weather still seems manageable. The distance still appears short. Strength still feels sufficient. But each reasonable decision steadily narrows the remaining safe options. With every passing minute, the margin for recovery shrinks. By the time the danger is finally recognized, control has already been lost. Mount Washington does not require a decisive blow. It does not kill in a single moment. It kills slowly, through time, through distance, and through a decision made too late. Mount Washington does not look like a place where people die. There are no sheer cliffs or endless glaciers. No massive storms are required. No heavy snowfall is necessary. Most of the time, it simply stands there, open and accessible. And that is precisely why it continues to kill. What happens on this mountain does not unfold in a single moment. It unfolds as a process. It begins with a sense of safety, with reasonable decisions, with the belief that the danger has already passed. Over the decades, Mount Washington has left behind very real traces. A list of names displayed at the summit. Rescue teams that remain on constant readiness throughout the year. Trails, shelters, and warning signs placed within a landscape that still looks like a tourist destination. The mountain has not changed, but the memory of it has. Among hikers, among rescuers, and among families who never saw their loved ones return. Mount Washington does not require recklessness. It only requires you to believe that you are still safe. So when everything still looks familiar, still feels accessible, and still seems under control, how does anyone know the exact moment when real danger has truly begun? If you believe stories like these deserve to be told with care and honesty, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.